just show this off, because this is something when we quoted it that we wanted to be really clear with the factory that the slope of this is exactly 30 degrees, the face of the thing here. Did you guys experiment with different slopes and angles for this mountain?
Yeah, we did, Josh, right? I think we have 3 angles, and this one was the middle one. So the other pour was too slow, and the gravity was not actually working out on the dice going in. And then the higher slope, the pouring was just like exploding everywhere. So yeah, we made a bunch of prototype, and this one was the first one actually held up the best. It was the right angle, it was the right way to go down. And then I think the second piece of the equation is, and actually even you can see on the prototype, is that's how we do the cats, because it was hard to pour from the top. So that was the second also aspect of the pouring, is you have to pour closer and lower from the first prototype.
Right, yeah. Do you want to show that one that's got the pointed top? Because I've got, like, to compare that to this one, this is the first punch board one that we built, which has this scoop out of the top.
Yeah.
And so the thing that let me just grab a bunch of these dice and throw them in, because this is how this goes. This is what people have been asking about, is when you pour these things down, do they go all over the table? Not really, not unless they can escape over the side there. Those just all kind of, and this scoop at the top kind of helps keep that cup in there. Now, the standard edition doesn't come with a cup, but even still, it's pretty easy to just pour handfuls of those in there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, Josh, you have the same version, right?
Yes.
With the,
Yeah, in this, like with this prototype, we made the supports on the back are detachable, and we just cut a bunch of different angle supports, and then we tested it with the different angles, you know. And certainly there were pros and cons to being higher or lower. I think we settled for a good balance of it, so using gravity well, being visible on the table, but not blocking people who might be behind it too much. Because, you know, one of the challenges is being able to see it from every angle of the table. Also, the higher it stands, the more presence it has on the table for, like, spectators. You know? So there were a lot of factors there.
Before we get too far in this, do you two just want to introduce yourselves quick? I've got, like, there was more I was going to leap into about some interesting playtesting observations on that mountain, but let's do that first.
Yeah, hey, I'm Josh DeBonis. I'm a game designer from Brooklyn, New York. And I mostly design video games. I do arcade games primarily, but I've done a couple tabletop games with Nico. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikola Risteski. I grew up in France. I moved into the States in 2008, where I rapidly actually met Josh, part of the New York board game designer. There was a great group for me to actually get to know people, and Josh was leading that. And then one day we started to work more closely together, and it was fun to design and test everybody's games, and I enjoyed it. And we got lucky to do our first game and to work on Dice Manor and work with you. So it's fun. I like it. I like this hobby. Let's say for me, it's not my primary job, but it's very interesting and I enjoy it. And pretty happy today on being with you there.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
The group that we met as part of, I think that was really important for both of us at that time. It was maybe, I don't even know what year it was, honestly. It's been quite a while since we met, but Nico would host this playtest group at his apartment every once in a while, and I would organize it. And so I think, we sometimes I'd show up there a little early or stay late, and we'd get chatting, and eventually we said, let's get together and like make a game together. And actually that turned into our first collaboration, which is called Isle of Monsters. And then also there was a mechanic that we had explored really early on that turned into this. And we were trying to put it into Isle of Monsters, but it just didn't fit. But we said this mechanic is cool, which is the dice drafting Anyway, yeah, Jeff, I'm sorry. And would you like to introduce yourself?
No, not at all. I'm Jeff Tidball. I'm the producer and developer on this. I work at Atlas Games. I don't need to go particularly into me. I think people are mostly here to listen to you guys. The thing that you were just talking about with the dice miner mechanic coming out of something in Isle of Monsters is actually almost as if you planned to answer one of these first sets of questions that we've got. Ben Moy sent 3 in on our survey, and he is the designer of our Atlas Games release that's actually coming out in July called Breakdancing Meeples, which is a fascinating game. I talk more a little about it. Have we talked about that at all?
No, but it sounds great.
It's hysterical. If you played Fuse before, it's basically a real-time game like Fuse, except you roll meeples instead of dice. So they land in like headstands and on their sides, and you have to concoct dance routines as fast as you can. There are 1-minute rounds, so there's an app that plays a timer. Anyway, the game is amazing. And so these questions are from Ben. He is the designer of that one. He asked if you tend to design theme first or mechanic first. So Dice Miner, for sure, it sounds like was mechanic first.
Definitely.
Yeah. It was Isle of Monsters theme first or mechanic first?
Mechanic first. Well,
no, we have an idea. It was a different game. We have a theme and we worked it out, and then we had the theme, and with the theme, then usually the mechanics come with it. And I like to work more like that and drive the theme and the idea of what we try to do to create a mechanism that works with it and not the opposite.
Yeah, I guess we started with a theme, which led to a mechanic, and then once we had the mechanic, we said, okay, is this the best theme for it? And we said no, and we changed the theme. Because it was I guess our original theme, Nico, correct me if I'm wrong, but our original theme was zombie monkeys, right?
Yeah.
Was that the original one?
Yeah, I think the name was Banana Brains.
Yeah, I still love that name, actually.
It's a good name, yeah. So we tried to go around the world and the dice, I think, was the zombies, and we tried to invade cities. So the island at that game actually were cities, Timbuktu, India, New York. And it was too much going on the game, and we tried to reduce. And the thing that went off was the dice, and we were pretty sad about it. It was a good move for the game itself, but the drafting of the dice went away, and we draft differently with cards and tokens. So that's why we always say we need to come back with something around the dice and work on the different material together. Yeah.
So Ben asked how that leaning board sort of came about. Was that a bolt of inspiration, or is there a hilarious story about how somebody's table broke, or what's the genesis of that?
Well, when we're playing at the beginning, we try to find a shape to draft. So we try rectangle, we try everything, and then we finish with the triangle. And the triangle is a pyramid, and we created the board you've seen in flats, and we had slots, because when we try to put 20 dice together, it doesn't work. Always the table is moving. So we created a board to maintain the visibility of the game, and it was okay, but it was not great. I think the mechanism was there, but I think, Josh, the idea came from a playtest, right? One at NYU or something.
Yeah, we got a lot of good feedback from various playtests, but especially the thing that I think really got us thinking in a certain direction was there was a conference called Practice at the NYU Game Center, which it was a game design exclusive conference. Like you weren't allowed to talk about the business side or manufacturing or programming or anything. It's just pure game design. It was awesome. They don't do it any longer, unfortunately. I love that conference. But one of the sessions there, you could present an open design problem that you're working on. And so I presented that in a lot of other. There's a room filled with probably 200 amazing game designers, and it didn't lead to a direct solution there. But what people said, and we had kind of been thinking this already, but it really reinforced it, is let gravity be your friend. You know, like take advantage of gravity. It's a very intuitive intuitive thing. You know, like players, you get a lot out of it without having to explain anything. And it's something I've also observed making video games, like in platformers. Gravity is awesome because it adds so many rules and nuance to your game, but you don't have to explain anything to the players because everybody knows how gravity works, right? You don't even think about it. And so I think that idea of like using gravity to control the flow and the setup of the dice was the turning point there.
Yeah, I think also the fact that the dice were actually flat, and then we actually have to move them 45 degrees so they can stack nice to with each other. I think it was also a key evolution on the prototype and the game.
And, yeah, because we had a mountain that was where they were flat, right? They weren't angled.
No. Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, you can really see before that, it wasn't. I don't think we even considered it a mountain, right? I think the mountain idea came out of the fact that it was standing up and it just looked like a mountain. Is that right, Nico? I mean, it's been a while.
I mean, it looked like a pyramid. So in my mind, it was more like an Egyptian type of game.
Right.
Without anything, because again, it was super early and we were working more on the mechanism and what can be funny, what can be fun, what can be interesting on a game. So we were working first on that, and it was flat, but there is no background to it. And then like you were saying, and when we get from here to there, then people's heads start to kind of like look at the table, like, hey, what are you guys doing? And there was a big difference. And this is where we say, okay, maybe we have a game that has a potential. And that's where we went deeper in the game, add the theme to it. And this is where we say, okay, now we need some dice, and which color, what do we do with them? So
And yeah, before it was the mountain and it was more of a pyramid, the hazards, like the dragons and the cave-ins. I guess we still had the cave-ins, but the dragons were bats, right?
Yeah.
It was a little more like Indiana Jones.
That's true. It was Indiana Jones theme. Yeah. Jungle and yeah.
And then that also led us to the dwarves, right? Like, because the dwarves really played into the mountain theme, and mining, the fact, like, so like that, it seems like if you look at the game now, the dwarves are front and center. They seem like almost like the game came from the idea of how would a dwarf mine dice out of the mountain, but the actual genesis was almost backwards,
Do you ever, you talked about playtesting influencing how the game developed, and I have had many experiences in games that I'm developing especially, but also games that I'm designing, where I almost feel like a fraud for claiming to be any kind of creative force, because mostly what I do is show people the prototype and write down the suggestions and then like glean through them.
Same.
Designer is code for idea collector.
Yeah, I would say a steward of a design.
I love steward. That's wonderful.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, it's not to discredit the role, because there's a lot of judgment calls in going into knowing what to listen to and what to ignore. People will throw a million ideas out there, and most of them are just not the right direction.
Have you ever come back around to a suggestion that at first you thought was just 180 degrees wrong, that turns out to have been the right suggestion? I've absolutely done that.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I will say, I think some of our biggest breakthroughs, though, have been the opposite, where it didn't come out of any kind of player feedback, and it was just a moment of like divine inspiration, I guess. Especially, I think Nico is really good with this. Like, the thing that immediately comes to mind happened fairly late in development, which was that the hazard dice were too powerful, and we couldn't. It was too dominant of a strategy to always go for the hazard dice. We couldn't get them to be balanced and intuitive. It was a real challenge. And Nico, I don't know where you got the idea, but like one day you just like we had been play testing it and beating on the idea for weeks, all three of us. And Nico just said, well, what if if the magic, you can't use the magic on the hazards? And it was just like, yeah, it was so obvious. It's a simple idea. It was so obvious. It's great, and it solved it. And the game is way better for that. Where did that just come out of nowhere, Nico?
I think it's just more about we all three of us thought about the topic and try to find solution, and we send a couple emails and you read and try to, it's difficult. And I say, it was a Saturday, and I say, Josh, do you have some time to talk? And I think having to exchange on the topic and talk around it, kind of like create those synergy interaction and ideas, kind of like bump into to each other, and to finally, try to think out of the box. So I think it's more about talking to you and sharing and exploring ideas than just, thinking loud. And most of it is, like you say, is wrong, and maybe one of them will be okay. That's why I think it's great and fun to work with someone. It's just by yourself, and I think we're very complementary on the design. So, and it's great. Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that multiplying effect of hazards, because that is actually something that I had in mind when I was talking about that, because for a long time I would get these playtest comments that would be something like, oh man, hazards are too powerful. The fact that you can multiply those with the thing, that's a dominant strategy. No one can ever win unless they adopt the hazard strategy. And I would, write that down, because you write down everybody's stuff and attempt not to judge it. But for the longest time, I kind of rejected that feedback, or didn't take it as seriously as it ultimately needed to be taken, because it would always come from people who had just lost to that. And that's also the feedback you get from somebody who was just beaten by a strategy. You've always got to kind of take with a grain of salt. We had somebody who asked about solo mode, who has not seen yet that there will be a solo mode. The question is, will there be one? The answer is yes. Do you guys want to talk about the development process on Dice Miner solo mode?
Sure. Yeah, we didn't want to do it. No, I think it's fun. I think a solo is great. My approach to it right away is I didn't want, and it's not just in Dice Miner in general. It's like solo mode for a game has to be different. I say we should not try to create a ghost or a bot to kind of like fake a second player. And I think
right.
That was my direction. My first direction is to do that. My second direction is it has to be fast. Maybe we should do one round and maybe omit some colors. So I came up with some ideas on that. So I tried to poke some ideas, do something different, but at the same time, most of the rules still needs to stand, so you don't have to learn a brand new game. So I think that was the challenge on creating the solo mode, is something different and fun, but still very close to the multiplayer game as far as like rules. So it still feels natural and still feels Dice Miner.
Do either of you play very many solo games yourself?
Outside of Dice Miner, or
yeah.
Some dungeon crawling back in the day, but it's hard. It's hard to build a solo game, and to go to a solo game to multiplayer from a multiplayer game, it's even harder. I think so. But I hope people will enjoy what we've done there. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't play solo tabletop games. I've tried, and I like way back I used to play a couple of the Avalon Hill games solo. Like there was a Battle of Britain one that I remember trying to play, and I loved the idea of it, but I just could never actually get into it. And it's always kind of perplexed me as a designer, because I play lots of video games solo and I have no problem with that. And there is there's definitely a certain stigma about playing tabletop games solo. I don't quite understand culturally why that exists, but it's certainly real. Like playtesting the solo mode of Dice Miner was really interesting because of quarantine. My only playtester was myself and my wife that I had immediately available, and she loves tabletop games, but she despises the idea of playing a game by yourself, even a video game. It's just not something she does. But she really liked Dice Miner solo, and it changed her perception of it. She always comments when she sees like we've been playing Terraforming Mars together, and whenever she sees that you can play it one player, she says like, "Why would you ever play that by yourself?" or whatever. But she really liked Dice Miner. In fact, she was asking to play it again, which I thought was a really good sign. And it's interesting how she changed her opinion there. But I don't know. I mean, have you guys noticed a stigma, I guess, about playing tabletop games solo? And like why is that? And why is it different than video games?
I don't know why it is, but I feel it. I have traditionally found it very baffling. It's funny. My family, like, think of Klondike Solitaire, right? The 9-column game or whatever. I don't think I have played that as a one-person game for 20 years. When my family goes up to the cabin, we wind up playing 4, 5, 6, 7-player games of multiplayer Klondike, which is originally a solitaire game. So we like do the opposite and bust those one players out to multiplayer games. But I will say the experience of playtesting the solo mode of Dice Miner honestly has turned me around a little bit on that. I think I played that the version that now has become the final release version. I think I played 7 times the afternoon, and at some point, like around game 4 or 5, it was clear that I did not need to be spending more work time playtesting this game that was more or less fine, but I was not ready to stop playing it. So wound up playing it for probably another 40 or 60 minutes. And it was just, I had a really good time doing it. And I think that that's a really great sign for this particular design. I think people are really going to like it.
I think one of the comments, Jeff, that I like, it says like, oh, my score kept increasing, meaning that you can improve yourself, you can improve your strategy, meaning that the game itself have more depth to it, and you can, play 6 times and you will grind 5 points, 10 points at a time. So I think that was a great comment, and I can prove that the solo game, is good. And like you, I've been playing 7 times in a row, and I just have to go to bed at some point. It was too late.
Right.
Fun, yeah.
Amanda and I, my wife, we were actually playing it solitaire, but alternating and competing for the high score. And I was like, wow, this is actually, you can play this also 2-player, because it's a fairly quick tournament through the single player.
Yeah.
And especially if you're familiar with the game. So that was actually, that was interesting that was the case. The other thing I think is worth mentioning is how the solitaire version came about, which was I guess in March or April, or probably April. Sometime in April, Jeff said, we should think about a solitaire version because of COVID. And we hadn't really thought about it before then, and we're like, yeah, of course. And it was a great design challenge because the manufacturing was already underway, and so we couldn't change any components. We had to work with very tight constraints, and that often leads to really interesting ideas. And I think it worked here. And it was fun. It was a good challenge too for us to. I mean, we had to design it remotely. We couldn't get together to do it, so we did a lot of phone calls, and Nico and I went the afternoon where we, I think, did the lion's share of the design on it. We had our laptops set up, and we were talking over, I guess, it was over Zoom or whatever. And the laptop with the webcam not pointing towards us, but pointing towards the table. And so we were like kind of playing together, just saying like, oh, grab that die over on the left, or, grab the blue die on the left, or something like that. And that was actually, it was kind of an interesting way to design together.
Yeah, and I think a lot of game we actually play at the same time and try to beat each other too.
Oh,
like, yeah, on both prototype. Yeah, I think the fact that we have a constraint and framework due to the material on the game and we late on development, I think that it's a great motivation and kind of like help us to drive us through the creation piece of it. When we started our first game, we took a long time to develop, and we were not in a rush and all. I think the second game, for Dice Manor, we said we put a framework together. So we only gonna work for 6 months on this game. We gonna try to work with dice, limit the material. We want a game that pretty much 20 minutes. So we set that as a baseline. And so we were meeting each other, more often, obviously, and that kind of like drive us through to go to results faster because we knew where we were going. We had the idea. I mean, obviously, working on the previous game and the drafting, it's like we already worked on the game already in a subconscious somewhere. But having that timeline, the material, straight from the beginning of the game, I felt like the same way when we say, hey, guys, you need to do a solo game. It felt a bit the same way. And I think it's fun for creativity to not be just wide open. To say, okay, let's work on this specific aspect and let's just, let's try to make it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So here's the shortest question we received, and 2/3 of this 3-word question is actually a statement. Dwarves rule. Why?
So the question really is just why.
Why?
So I don't know if this exactly answers the question, but one thing that I realized in this process was how different people's conceptions of dwarves are. Like mine is like based on like the Tolkien dwarf, high fantasy dwarves, like reading Lord of the Rings as a kid, playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like so that's how I always kind of envisioned them. But then when we were playtesting, it was the three of us were when we were all at the NBA Game Center. One of the playtesters there, Deanna, said we were talking about the dwarves to her, and this was before there was a lot of the finalized art. It was clear to her that her vision was like the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs version of dwarves, which is a very different interpretation, yet still fantasy based. It's more like a fairy tale interpretation, And I don't know, that just really got me thinking about how broad that that idea is and how many interpretations there are. So I guess to answer the question from my perspective is that it can it can be interpreted in many ways. And actually for me, I mean, one of the reasons I really like it is that at least our version of dwarves really like beer, and beer is central to the game. Nico and I both love beer, and I think Jeff, you like beer too, right?
I'm a fan of beer, yes.
Okay, and but whenever we'd get together to work on this and our other game, we would it would be over a beer or two, I think that's just it's part of the theme that really resonated with us. Like it's been a social thing for us when we're designing. Like we get together, it's partially to hang out as friends, right? And it's an excuse to get together and hang out and share a couple beers. And so I like that we were able to tie that in, and yeah, I guess that's my very long-winded answer of why.
But that has always been, ever since I first saw the prototype for this game when it arrived with us, the social aspect of dwarves, and it's like a boisterous social aspect of dwarves has been part of this game, which I guess lots of people probably assume is part of it. I can think of lots of scenes from the Lord of the Rings or from the Hobbit where dwarves are all doing boisterous partying and things like that. And so that, I think, if somebody's going to ask me, that's part of why dwarves rule, because they are social and like they're sort of metal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there was that scene that they dance in that small, I don't know if it was a house, and with a party, it was a big table and food, and they were dancing and climbing on the table. It's a very fast-paced scene from The Lord of the Rings. I don't even know how they actually filmed that. It's insane. But the dancing, shaking, and beers going, this is the feeling we want to have, with this manner. And when we actually throw the beer dice to someone, you have to say a cheers or whatever things you want to say in your own culture, and that's kind of like the fun about it. I think it was. How can we, work around? I can you also interact? Also, I think that was one of the questions. Maybe wasn't bad. It's how can you in a multiplayer game interact with each other, and not being like Dominion. You work on your own. You compete with something else, but there's not a lot of interaction. And I think the beer is part of the interaction with someone else in that game. So that's what makes it even better, I think.
Do you guys have any design thoughts about the level of interaction between players, like that is most desirable or that is most aesthetically pleasing to you? Because there's a lot of, maybe division is too strong a word in the design community, but people butt heads about the question of whether it is good for players to even be able to affect each other during play, because it can lead to negative experiences, right? If we're playing a 3-player game and you two are just going at it with each other, I'm essentially going to get a free ride through that game. And so a lot of the Euro style games revolve around minimizing or eliminating that experience.
Well, I would say a lot of the games that I design are two-sided games, like either 2 players or maybe 2 teams against each other. And in that case, it's absolutely a good thing. And it doesn't have that issue because there is no third player who is benefiting from your direct interaction. But yeah, once you make it more than 2 sides, I think it's a matter of taste. And as far as what I like to design, I think what we like to design as a team, it tends to be that we want some interaction there, but largely indirect or in ways that feels very positive more than negative. So like, basically, with this beer mechanic, the way it works is if you have a beer, you can give that die to another player in exchange for you being able to take 2 dice, and so you're only helping the other player generally. So like it's like I get something for it and you also get something, and there's some politics there in that I'll generally choose to help the player who's behind, but it feels good for that player. Everybody likes getting that die. And there are occasionally moments where you can give a die to somebody that is actually bad for them, but it's so rare and that I think it feels good and exciting when it does happen.
Yeah. I mean, in the game, you can actually roll hazards, to someone that doesn't have any protection, and if you get for dragon, that's a little bit of the way to do it, but you don't control fully. So I think it's a good limiting version of being negative or negative experience, and it's not too bad, let's say. And we talk about the series of the dice and what we can do with it and how we can score. Moving and pick a die from another player or swapping dice. We talked a lot about it, and we rejected the idea because it's too powerful and it's not easy to go around, and the effects, like you're saying, is too much on a game that's actually it's a simple game. It's not a very complex game. It's not like there's a ton of things. I change you a couple of dice or tokens. It's not gonna affect you a lot. In Dice Miner, you lose a die, you can lose 15 points or more. So it was so that was why we didn't do much. But I think the way to interact is by playing more defense and try to actually pick the die on the board. Maybe it's not the best for you, but make sure that your opponent doesn't get the full effect on the treasure, for example, or such.
I think that people who are playing Dice Miner for the first or second or even the third time don't often do not immediately understand what you were just talking about there, Nico, the fact that you can that you really are in a competition for those dice. And like everybody sort of understands that we're all taking turns drafting dice for the mountain, but there are ways to be relatively vicious with your picks, especially if somebody is pursuing a strategy where they absolutely must have tool dice. For example, you don't care about having tool dice one way or the other, and it doesn't necessarily even help you all that much to take one. But if you manage to grab a shield or grab a pickaxe that somebody who's relying on that needs, it's a non-obvious but pretty important interaction between players, I think. Somebody asked about expansions for this game, and you were sort of just talking about how much design space there is and how difficult that might be in this case. Do you guys think that that's even a conceivable thing for Dice Miner?
Yeah. I mean, you go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely it is that, because early on we had at least 2 additional colors of dice that we don't have now, and we had to pare it down to, what is it, 5 colors now, I think. Right?
Yep.
So to me, the obvious solution is just, basically add a couple other sets of dice that work in different ways, and then if you had 7 sets and 7 different colors, and you pick any 5 to play a game with or whatever, you could get a lot of variety.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it. I think we play a lot with 6 colors, but then the probability to have the right combination of dice was too low. So we dropped 1 color, obviously. We talked about keeping the core as a tunnel and swapping colors too. So I think there's definitely a lot of room to make it happen. You just have to work on it, I guess.
I think there's room for micro expansions with the characters as well. I could definitely, we could do a very large number of characters. It might be fun at some point to release a new character just as its own standalone expansion. I don't know how that fits in with your ideas, Jeff.
No, I don't know. I would love to see expansions to Dice Miner. I was going to say that those heroes are another interesting example of. So I guess my early experience, especially thinking about this particular design, while I was trying to figure out whether it was even producible for an amount that anybody would want to pay for it. I played with it a bunch, and one of the things that impressed me a lot is that the design was just so tight, and I had trouble imagining how you would develop the game or change it or make it better in a meaningful way, because if you like pull on one thread, the entire sweater falls apart and it's nothing. And I was surprised when we added the heroes, which are characters for the people who have not played it, who give you a number of dice faces or a power that you are allowed to use all the time. And it's funny because it seems like such an obvious thing, but only in retrospect. Like now it seems like there could never have been Dice Miner without heroes. And of course, mostly there was Dice Miner without heroes. And I guess maybe, I don't know what this illustrates. I guess it just goes to show that there is always design space for everything. But one of the things that initially impressed me so much about this design was kind of how tight it was and how all of the elements of scoring sort of pointed back into other elements of scoring such that it all feels very organic to me.
One of the questions on Facebook was specifically about that. Said what is the design process for creating and balancing the character cards?
Oh, right on. You guys my comment feed must be dead here. Yeah, answer that.
Yeah, that came from feedback from Jeff, which was particularly in a 4-player game, there often wasn't quite enough dice for interesting scoring in the first round in early iterations of the game. And so we started thinking, well, like, okay, how do we get more dice into your hands in a 4-player game? And I think maybe one of the ideas we probably would have first floated is, well, what if you just start with some dice or something like that? And just to further explain it, it's because there are 20 dice on the mountain at any given time. So if you're drafting those, in 2 players you get 10 dice each. In 4 players you only get 5 dice each. And so you really needed about 7 dice to have a really meaningful scoring game. So eventually we said, well, okay, what if you we don't want to ship it with more dice than you actually put on the mountain, and it doesn't make sense just to start with dice that you never roll. But we said, what if we put printed dice faces on a character, and then you score that character every round. And not only did that solve the problem, but also it was exciting because now you're embodied in a character, and you have a strategy from the beginning. And it also, some of the characters did some other more interesting things where they get special rules. And I mean, I think as far as our process on that, it was once we had figured out that we were going to have the heroes, it was just a lot of brainstorming of what heroes might work. And I think we realized heroes that were very focused didn't work particularly well because they pigeonholed you into a strategy. There was a hero that had a 1 and a 2 tunnel, and with that hero, you would there was no way to play other than to just go tunnels. And so it was less interesting than a hero that had a tunnel and a magic, or two different types of symbols. There is actually one hero that has a 1 and a 5 tunnel that for whatever reason works really well and is fun. So there are certainly exceptions to that rule, but I mean I think that was the process, right?
Yeah. Although that I don't know. So it seems like people do not find that the Scout is the name of that hero that's got the 1 and the 5. That is the one who is persistently losing in all of our backer surveys as to which hero backers are interested in seeing next. I'm relatively confident at this point. There is so much enthusiasm around those heroes generally that I think we're going to see all 6 of those heroes unlocked, which I find pretty exciting because I am really interested in giving people the chance to play the version of the game where you wind up with 3 heroes at the beginning and you're allowed to play 1 in each round, but you sort of have to figure out which order you want to play them in based on what comes out in the first mountain and then what comes out in the second mountain. You got to figure out how to adapt your strategy across 3 different heroes with the same pool of dice. So I'm hoping that all of those get unlocked because I think that that's a fascinating variant for play.
Me too. I have a friend who backed it, who messages me saying, which one should I vote on? I want the inside scoop of which one I should vote on. So I'm not gonna tell you what I told him, but he, I guess I'm getting a little bit more of a say in it than maybe I should in my recommendations to him.
Well, I mean, they're not locked down. You can create as many SurveyMonkey accounts as you want, I guess. It totally. Did I say that out loud? I'm going to have to edit this out of the YouTube version. So Nathan asked about the games that have been the strongest influences on you, or if you like, which games are opposite your preference.
Mm-hmm. Nico?
So say it again. Which inspire us, or
yeah, which games are particular inspirations for you or strong influences, or on the flip side, which games are anti-influences, if that drives you more?
I mean, my favorite game is still, and for a long time, Magic the Gathering. It's not exactly, it's a card game. I'm still blown away how they can release every 4 months on rules that Garfield created 20 plus years ago. That's framework, and the 5 magic stays the same. The rules are the same. The phases are the same, and they keep being creative about it. And that's really kind of very inspiring to say, okay, we can do a lot with only 20 dice on a mountain. You know what I mean? When you talk about expansion, just get inspired by those guys developing Magic, always come up with a new creation, new ideas to make the game the same, but always a little bit different and better and more fun.
Yeah. That Magic is such an inspired design that I have the tendency to like feel angry about it, which like not actually angry, but you're like, God, come on, Richard Garfield, come on.
So yeah.
That was an influential game for me too. Like in high school, I played it a lot. I haven't played a lot of the more recent sets. Until very recently, I did start playing Magic Online, the Arena, or is that what it's called?
Yeah, Arena. Yeah.
And but thinking about a game that I like, but is not at all the type of game that I would design, is Advanced Squad Leader, which it's an old tabletop war game that I used to be really into. I have not played it in at least a decade, probably longer, because it's so arcane and takes forever to play. But I mean, it's got thousands of little cardboard chits and huge tables that you look everything up on. I was trying to see if I had some. I know I had some of the charts around here, but I can't find them right now. But I love so many things about that game, all the history that it encompasses, and like the rule book is literally a binder of hundreds of pages, and like with every expansion, you would open up the binder and put in another 20 pages or whatever of very fine legalese, and you quote rules saying like, oh, it's rule A 2.2 or something like that, and but it's so inelegant. It's not at all the type of game that I want to make. I want to make simple, quick to play, elegant games, and as much as I love Advanced Squad Leader, it feels very dated, and I don't. I want it. I want it to be something in the world that I can appreciate, but not. I don't really want to. I don't want to play it. But it's worth, if you haven't played, or if you're not familiar with Advanced Squad Leader, it's definitely worth Googling it and reading up on it. It's a really weird game with its own culture around it, and some really interesting ideas.
Car Wars was the game like that I played back in the day, which was not like it. Advanced Squad Leader was a whole thing above and beyond Car Wars even, but that was a very gnarly game with lots of expansions and detailed rules. But so that's been even recently reinvented in a new edition that has very much evolved to kind of what the modern appreciation for and taste in games is. So maybe we see a new Advanced Squad Leader burning on Kickstarter sometime. So I don't even know how that would work, but that's someone's game design challenge.
That would actually, you know who did that? I actually have this game, Tide of Iron. Actually, you can see it right up there. That is a much more modern take on it. It's squad-based World War II combat, and it borrows a lot of the ideas from it. And I think it's a good game. It takes too long to play, so I haven't actually spent a lot of time with it because it's almost as heavy as Advanced Squad Leader, but without it's not as arcane, but it's still heavy and long. But I think it's a really good attempt at it. I'd love to see it boiled down even more. There's Close Combat was like the Microsoft video game that also it has a lot of the same elements, but it just doesn't have the same feel to it.
Tide of Iron is a really interesting example because that was essentially the opening salvo in the modern trend of gigantic boxes full of plastic to the top, and also sort of a high production value video marketing of sort of modern American style board games. I remember seeing the like almost HBO trailer style videos that Fantasy Flight put together to promote that and thinking it was an entirely new era in board games sort of then. A couple of people asked just questions that I want to answer quick because they're kind of about Kickstarter stuff that people are interested in. Somebody asked if our money threshold is real. I guess it is not entirely uncommon for people to put backer thresholds low in hopes of getting a big multiple together. But the fear is that the project will get canceled even if it is technically funded because we did not reach our actual secret devious goal. The answer is that no, there is not an actual secret devious goal. It is absolutely true that $12,500, which is the funding goal, does not necessarily get this game made in terms of what the bill from the factory is. But a lot of Atlas's so Atlas is a publisher with very deep ties to the retail community and lots of traditional distribution. And so part of our financial calculation is that Kickstarter helps us reach people, but a lot of the sales of Dice Miner at the end of the day are going to go through traditional distribution. So Dice Miner is going to get made, absolutely. The funding goal is a real goal where when we hit that, it gets made. So there is not any danger that we are going to cancel this Kickstarter. In fact, the molds for the dice got started last Friday, so it is all underway even now. Somebody asked about whether deluxe dice can go in as an add-on. There are people who think that the cardboard mountain looks great. We talked about that internally the other day, and you will be able to buy just the deluxe edition dice set. So if you like the multicolored dice, the translucent glitter ones, those are going to be available as an add-on. That may wind up costing more than some people want. It's likely to be 18 or 20 bucks for that complete set of 60 dice. I don't know where else you can go though to buy 60 dice for 18 or 20 bucks. So it seems broadly like a good deal. But yes, add-ons for those will be available. We're also going to make the punchboard mountain available as an add-on for people who want to get the deluxe edition, but also have that punchboard mountain. That is going to be a thing. So
those deluxe dice are awesome, by the way. I can't believe how cool they turned out. You know, I think, you know, I think you wrote this on the video where it says every gamer loves dice, and I think that's really true, and I think certainly resonates with Nico and I, and it's, but I hadn't thought of it that way. You know, we've been seeing the dice as like materials to convey the game design that we've been doing, but like I certainly just love dice, right? Like I've got like a whole box of them. Like let me actually bust this out. Like, you know, it's like this is all my like just box of random dice, right? And
right on.
it was twice as big before we started this project, but I took so many of them, you know, to make prototypes of this game, you know, and sent them around to playtesters and publishers and stuff, and
yeah.
So, you know, I assume you're the same, right, Nico? Is that fair?
Yeah, the thing like when you play, you know, D&D and Warhammer, like when you have your own die with your D20 and with your D12, and you have one that you love the most. And I think my favorite D20 was this white translucent tinier D20, and it was my best shot with it. And the dice was something very important to me, and I don't play as much anymore. And the dice, but then when my daughter she turned 7, we play Dice Miner every day since COVID. It was half of the days to school and half of the day is Dice Miner with my wife and all. It's been very fun. And once she started to see the dice, the real dice, not the prototype, and the deluxe, and she was like big eyes like that, and she loved it. And, you know, the glitter, the translucent, like it was coming real. It looks like magic. You know what I mean? It's way more than just. And like just say, like we were prototyping, so we're just taping and making, you know, try to make it nice and playable. But you guys brought this to the next level, and yeah.
I wish I could send a message back to myself in time, like of 2 years ago, when I was sitting there with the first very preliminary budgets for this, thinking, oh my God, there's no way we're going to be able to make this. I'm going to have to charge $75 for this game. It's got so many dice and a plastic mountain. Are you kidding me right now? But Like, and so the fact that it has worked out, and the fact that the standard edition game is going to sell for $29.95, I think is going to be huge for sales in stores. I think we're going to see people respond to this very, very strongly. The other thing that some people have been asking about is whether we're going to be able to add backer tiers that will let, especially backers who are overseas, do group pledges in order to drive those shipping costs down. First of all, let me say again or assure everyone that we are not any happier with how much it costs to ship games around the world than you are. It's really a big barrier to making these games affordable. But in any case, the answer to that is that yes, I managed to get clearance to do multiple, so like a set of 5 games to a single address anywhere in the world. We're going to roll those backer tiers out hopefully in the next day or two. I've just got to find some time to get those done. But so folks who are interested in backing, I know we've gotten a lot of inquiries, especially from Europe, about that. And it's not going to, like, still it's not going to be as inexpensive as everybody wants it to be. I don't know where people formed their ideas about how much it should cost to ship things places. We're certainly not living in the world where the expense is what it would be. It's cheaper than like me flying it, I guess, to Italy or France and handing it to people. But anyway, we are going to roll out tiers where you'll be able to get full cases of those, so you can organize gaming groups in order to get that done. So stay tuned for that, especially if that's something that you have been excited about. We have pretty much been through an hour. What else should folks hear from you guys about? Anything at all that you want to talk about?
Well, you know, one other thing I was thinking about dice when Nico was talking about like the Dungeons and Dragons dice. Whenever I see the old school light plastic D&D dice, like from the first edition or whatever, like that's what I fell in love with dice on, right? Is like those I don't know what they are. Maybe you know what they are, Jeff. That really lightweight plastic material.
I have no idea what kind of plastic that is. Nobody would use those. Yeah, no.
Yeah, but I love those, the feel, and they're kind of these muted pastel colors. I mean,
yeah.
There's something about those dice, and I just, whenever I see them, and it's rare that you see them these days. You know, probably. I mean, I don't do a lot of role playing anymore, but I would imagine in role playing circles they're probably more common. But I almost never see them at tabletop groups. You know.
Well, and you see like the 20-siders from that era that are like worn round
yeah.
from such use. So one of the stretch goals that is coming up that we have not announced yet, that we're kind of able to offer, because I am the common link to those. You can only sell stuff in a Kickstarter that is like part of your catalog or that you've developed as part of it. But one of the side projects that I've got with my partner, Will Heinmarch, is a company called Game Playwright. We publish books about games and about stories and kind of about the work of creating them. The second book that we did was a book called The Bones, which is a book of essays about dice, but it's not really about dice. It's about like how gamers think and what is their culture. The essay that I wrote in this book is about this guy I used to play Rollmaster with back in the day, who created his own metal dice on his CNC milling machine. He like made 10-siders by hand. He actually wound up giving a couple of them to me after we published that essay. It's so they are these just crazy objects of meaning for me. But anyway, if this stretch goal is unlocked, we're going to give digital copies of that book, The Bones, to everybody who is a backer to read essays about how dice like inform our lives as gamers and inspire us and drive us crazy and so on. So we'll see if backers are interested in that. All these things we're going to vote on, so maybe no one is interested in essays about dice. We'll see.
That's going to be my recommendation now.
All right, and you've got like the plug-in to make everyone vote. You're like the puppeteer.
Yeah, exactly. That's cool. I didn't even know about that book, Jeff. I'm excited to read that. That sounds right up my alley.
The other one that blows my mind out of this book, I interviewed a guy who built a machine. You can go find the YouTube video on this. I'll try to drop it in the comments later. So this is a guy who was running a play-by-email game of some kind that was vaguely similar to Axis and Allies in terms of what its scope was. But his players complained that the computer was not generating random results on D6s, is what the engine for this thing was. And so he built a machine in his basement that rolls 1.3 million six-sided dice every day and digitally captures what they land on and loads those into a file. And so that's where all the random results for his game come from now, is this machine that like constantly rolls. I don't know, there's like 100 or 200 dice inside the machine. They go down a spiral and get caught on trays, which then get lifted up and they get photographed while they're being lifted back up to the top of the thing so that he doesn't have to ever stop the machine. It's amazing. And the fact that it all comes from this complaint that the computer was not generating significantly random numbers, I just find the entire thing amazing.
I mean, if you do some programming and randomness, and there is nothing such as randomness, even if you try. And I had a teacher in college about it, and it was very interesting. You can go deeper, and it was 20-something years ago, so obviously the models are better now. But just we were talking about Arena. I don't know if you experience. Sometimes you will get 7, 8 lands in a row in Magic, and it's impossible. Like, I never played my life with a real deck having the same probability that Arena gave to us, and I think it's very, very interesting.
Oh, Jason is on. He is he is the guy who designed the mountain. He informs us in the comments that early cheap dice were made out of urea. The more you know.
What made out of
urea? UREA.
Huh. Okay.
I'm not convinced I even know what that substance is, although I've heard it before. It's also known as carbamide, says Wikipedia.
Cool. Thinking about Advanced Squad Leader, one of the things I really like about it is there's a culture around the dice for Advanced Squad Leader. First of all, a lot of the hardcore players, they test their dice, they test the randomness of their dice, like they'll roll them 1,000 times and figure out which dice are most balanced and use those.
Because of course they did.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of ridiculous because there's so much randomness in the game, and it's not like I find that amazing. But one thing is, there's 2 types of players. Like nobody rolls them on the table. There's players that use a dice tower, which I think most people are probably pretty familiar with, like a device you drop them into and they bounce around and land in a tray. But then the other players, which is the type of player I am, use a dice glass, which I have not seen in any other games. And I'm curious if you guys have.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so it's basically like it's not like you just use a regular glass, like maybe like a whiskey glass, like a maybe about this tall, and you throw your dice in it and they bounce around in the glass, and you cover it so they don't bounce out, and then they sit in the glass, so you don't accidentally bump them, because you need to refer to them throughout a turn. So you might roll them. And
of course, you have to refer to them later in the turn. That's beautiful.
Each die is the specific dice are important at times. So like there's 4 different colors of dice, and sometimes you just add them together. But other times you'll have to like look up what is the purple die, and but so if you go into a tournament, an Advanced Squad Leader tournament, it has such a unique sound to it because there's all these dice bouncing around in glasses. And I've never heard anything quite like it. And I've never seen any other game that uses that. And it's just very satisfying. In fact, so the guy that I used to play with regularly, he became a very good friend. The first time we played together, he brought over a pair of glasses and gave them to me, like dice glasses. I mean, they're just, I'm sure he just got them at Target or something, and nothing special, but they're just the right size. And like, it was such a great introduction to the game. And then he taught me how to play. And like, then that became part of my routine, as I'd always use those same glasses. And I still have those same ones,
That's awesome. That seems like a good story for us to leave it on, unless there's anything either of you wants to make sure to let people know about other projects that are coming up or anything like that that you want to make sure people know of.
I think
I
it's
think,
good.
yeah, that's good. That's it. I mean, I'm really excited to see where the Kickstarter campaign for this goes, and see the support from the community keep coming in. And I can't wait to get this out. And I'm excited to get my copy. You know, like it's we've played on prototypes for years now. It's like it's going to be so exciting to see the actual manufacturer.
I'm tired of fixing my dice, actually.
Yeah.
I've got one of my tunnel dice does not have a beer face anymore, and my kids even know that when they see the 6 on that die that it is beer.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way we do it, you use a clear nail polish on top to kind of like fix it, but yeah, they all fall off right now. So Jeff, please release the game.